In my previous life, my childhood sweetheart was kidnapped by our enemies. Just as they were about to pour sulfuric acid onto his face, I shoved him out of the way at the last second. But that act only redirected their hatred toward me. They turned and dumped the entire bottle of acid on me instead. I was instantly burned, my skin charred and carbonized. Meanwhile, Sterling, my childhood sweetheart, was rescued just in time by his arriving parents. He was completely unharmed. Not only did he escape unscathed, but afterward, he changed his stance entirely and married my adopted sister. "You were the one who chose to save me," he had said coldly back then. "What does it have to do with me? After all, I'm a man of status. I can't spend the rest of my life with a piece of blackened charcoal." Through his and my adopted sister's constant manipulation and slander, my family abandoned me. They sent me to the countryside, where I became a target for humiliation by a group of old bachelors. My adopted sister stole my inheritance and spent the rest of her life enjoying happiness and freedom by Sterling's side. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the day Sterling was kidnapped. Don't blame me for being ruthless this time. Blame your father. He brought this on you. A son must pay for his father's sins. The scruffy bearded man spoke coldly. He suddenly yanked a glass bottle from his backpack. Sterling, tied to a pillar, screamed in terror. "No, I don't want to die here. Please, my dad. Go to my dad. This has nothing to do with me." Then he spotted me standing silently at the door. His eyes lit up with hope as he cried out desperately, "Vesper, Vesper, please save me. I don't want to die here." The scene and his voice were all too familiar. My fingernails dug deep into my palms. The pain didn't torment me. Instead, it made the corners of my lips curve upward slightly. Heaven must be watching, because it brought me back to my 16th birthday, the very day the one who ruined my life began his descent into damnation. This time I will never save this bastard again. He'll pay 1,000 times over for everything he did to me before. The bearded man, Cyrus, suddenly turned toward me. His bloodshot eyes were filled with hatred and savagery. My entire body shuddered, not just from fear, but from a deep instinctive dread. But I had already died once. What could possibly scare me now? Besides, he deserves this. I didn't step in to stop anything, but I didn't turn and walk away either. I just stood there and spoke slowly, my tone heavy with meaning. "Sir, their family destroyed yours, but the dead can't come back to life. You've lived in agony all these years. Even if you kill him with your own hands now, the rest of your life will still be unbearable. Time heals everything. Let him go, and let yourself go too." Though it sounded like I was trying to persuade him, my words actually dragged him even deeper into his sea of hatred. He completely snapped and started beating Sterling furiously, punching, kicking, and screaming like a man possessed. "Even if I kill you, my son won't come back. My wife won't come back either. Why should you get to die so easily? I'll never let you go. I'll destroy you, drag you to the poorest mountain villages, and make you live like an animal to atone for what you've done to my son." Then Cyrus grabbed the sulfuric acid and poured it all over Sterling's body. Sterling let out an inhuman scream, wailing and thrashing in agony as the acid melted his flesh into countless festering holes. The air was thick with the stench of burning flesh and sulfur. It was nauseating enough to make anyone's skin crawl. After watching him fall into a state worse than death, I turned and walked away. The blue sky, white clouds, leafy trees, and gentle breeze outside painted a world completely different from that filthy basement. In this life, I would live under the sun. As for Sterling, he would rot like a rat in the gutter, never seeing daylight again. Once I was clear of the basement, I got straight to work. I called the police, dialed for an ambulance, and notified Sterling's parents. My voice trembled. My words were frantic and laced with sobs. In my past life, I had no talent for acting, but after crawling out of hell, it had become second nature. 10 minutes later, the police and the ambulance arrived simultaneously and took the scruffy, bearded man into custody. By that moment, he was already completely unhinged. Sterling lay on the stretcher, howling in pain like a wild beast. His screams echoed through the entire building, and to me they sounded like music. Sterling was disfigured, even more severely than I had been in my previous life. Back then, I was merely burned, with parts of my body black as coal. But this time he wasn't just disfigured. He lost his sight completely. And the most ironic part? His lower body was also permanently damaged. No amount of disinfectant in the ICU could mask the heavy stench of burnt flesh in the air. He was supposed to lie in bed writhing in pain, but the moment he saw me, his entire face twisted with rage. "Vesper, how dare you come here? If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be like this. If you had saved me back then, none of this would have happened. I wouldn't be suffering. I wouldn't have turned into this hideous monster. Why didn't you save me? I begged you. I begged you. Why didn't you save me?" His voice was thick with anguish, sounding like a death sentence. If I had heard this in my past life, I probably would have been overwhelmed with guilt and regret for the rest of my days. But not in this life. Because in my past life, I never would have let it come to this. I would have rushed in without thinking to protect him, which is exactly why I ended up dying so tragically. Tears welled in my eyes as I gripped my thighs so tightly that the physical pain brought real tears streaming down. I looked heartbreakingly wronged and vulnerable. "Sterling, I know you're in so much pain right now, but how could you misunderstand me like this? I was terrified when I saw that man yesterday. My legs nearly gave out. But when I saw him trying to hurt you, I still tried to stall him. I called the police and an ambulance and even notified our parents, all because I was afraid he'd hurt you. Are you blaming me for not running over to shield you from the acid?" I just froze in the moment. I thought once the police arrived, you'd be safe. "I'm so sorry. It's all my fault. I didn't protect you. If I had one more chance, I would definitely throw myself in front of you." I cried with heartfelt emotion. My explanation sounded flawless, and I managed to present myself as the kind girl who had risked everything to save him. Sterling nearly exploded with rage. He thrashed on the hospital bed, trying to climb up and hit me. "Vesper, you're lying. You're a liar. If you hadn't said those things to that lunatic, why would he have beaten me half to death and threatened to sell me to some remote mountain village? Mom, Dad, don't listen to her. She's the one who did this to me. She's a snake. She..." Before he could finish, Mr. Latham, his father, cut him off with a furious shout. "Enough! You're getting more and more out of line. Who taught you to speak like that? Your mother and I were both in a meeting at the time. If she hadn't called us crying and begging for help, you'd be dead right now. I asked the police and the doctors. She was the one who called first. Is this how you repay your savior?" Although Sterling was still furious, he shut his mouth obediently because he was genuinely afraid of his father. Besides, I had handled everything flawlessly. Not only did he have no solid proof, but even if he did, I could easily twist it around. As for why I even bothered to report the incident and save his life, simple. How else could I take revenge? How else could I return every bit of pain he caused me in the past 1,000-fold? How else could I make him and that ungrateful adopted sister of mine tear each other apart until their lives were worse than death? It felt far better to take revenge personally than to watch from the sidelines. Sterling was hospitalized for a long, excruciating road of multiple surgeries, skin grafts, and treatments. The pain was unimaginable. Most importantly, the area of injury was too large. He would never look like a normal person again. His eyes had suffered nerve damage and could only be replaced with prosthetics. Originally, because of our engagement and the fact that we were childhood sweethearts, I would have been expected to visit the hospital often. But thanks to his insults, I had the perfect excuse to say I was too heartbroken and humiliated to go. So I didn't have to show up at all. Mr. and Mrs. Latham even apologized to me on his behalf. My own parents tried multiple times to persuade me to visit him, but I completely ignored them. Although they were my biological parents, they never truly loved me. The only times they would show a hint of affection were when I scored well on exams or acted obedient. In my previous life, just to gain their approval, I agreed to the engagement even though I didn't love him. I forced myself to win the National Youth Piano Competition, even though I didn't like piano at all. But despite everything I gave, the moment I was disfigured, they deemed me worthless. They immediately let my adopted sister Sloane take my place. In the end, I was cast aside, tortured, and violated to death. People like them don't deserve to be called parents. I started selling my designer clothes and bags and got into stock trading. It's embarrassing to admit, but even though my parents were rich, they barely gave me any allowance, believing that too much money would make a daughter go astray. Every time I wanted to buy something, I had to get my mother's approval. Originally, I had secured a guaranteed graduate school placement, but my parents insisted that too much education was useless for a girl. They wanted me to join the company early, but after graduation they never brought it up again. They just told me to focus on Sterling. So now that I wanted to start my own business, I had zero capital. I sold off everything my mother had bought me to scrape together a small amount to begin investing. Soon the stock market began to rise. It took me 2 months to barely scrape together my first pot of gold. Just as I was about to invest in an e-commerce startup, Sterling was discharged from the hospital. To celebrate, he threw a welcome-back party and invited my whole family. The main purpose was to ease the tension between us. Given his current condition, no young woman in our social circle was willing to marry him anymore. It was a calculated move. Too bad for him. I immediately drove to the university and picked up my adopted sister, Sloane. I didn't tell her it was Sterling's party. She excitedly put on a pink strapless Chanel dress, did her makeup to perfection, and styled every strand of hair. But the moment she saw Sterling's disfigured face, her smile froze, and she looked like she was about to burst into tears. Back then, she had secretly flirted with him behind my back. But she wasn't as pretty as me, and her grades weren't as good. Naturally, Sterling never seriously considered her, though he enjoyed her fawning attention. With a bright smile I said, "Sloane has been asking about you these past few days, wondering if you're feeling better." She said she wanted to visit but felt shy. Even just now on the way here, she nervously asked me if her outfit looked good, worried you might not like it. She's my sister after all, and she's always liked hanging around you. Honestly, I used to get jealous. The way I lied with a straight face completely stunned Sloane. Sure, she had tried to seduce him before, but the moment she found out he was disfigured, she stayed far away. But since I just made her look so good in front of him, she couldn't object. If she offended the Latham family, her social life would be over. She could only lower her head shyly and murmur, "Vesper, what are you saying?" Which was essentially her way of admitting everything. At this point, Sterling might not have hated me down to the bone, but he definitely saw me as a venomous snake. He clearly wanted nothing to do with me. But when he looked at Sloane, who had recently gotten some cosmetic tweaks and was dressed to the nines, his lips curled into a smile. That same smile used to charm girls, but now with his disfigured face and twitching eyelids, it was terrifying. "Sloane, it's stuffy in here. Push me out to the garden for some fresh air," he said. Sloane went pale. Her legs trembled, and just as she was about to refuse, I stepped forward and gently placed her hand on the handle of his wheelchair. "Sis, make sure you take good care of Sterling, okay?" I picked up a glass of champagne and walked off. Sloane was trapped. She had no choice but to push him outside. Her face showed nothing but disgust and nausea, yet she still forced out a syrupy voice. "Sterling, I'm so relieved to see you recovering." It had been a long time since Sterling heard a girl flirt with him. He was over the moon, and his grin became even more hideous. Sloane didn't even dare look him in the eye. But as long as you captured the right angle under the dim garden lights, getting a few shots of them looking intimate wasn't a problem. Just then a breeze blew and a few leaves fluttered down. He instinctively reached up to grab one, then suddenly clutched her hand instead, pulling her into his arms like an over-the-top drama. I was mashing my phone screen, taking hundreds of pictures. Later, I would pick the most intimate ones and pair them with the love letters Sloane used to write him. Given that I was the understanding fiancé, the public would eat it up. When we got home, Sloane stormed into my room. "Vesper, all because of the crap you made up. Sterling wouldn't stop harassing me. Do you even know how disgusting he looks now? His whole body reeks." I nearly threw up. I lounged on the sofa, looking at her with a half-smile. "Really? But didn't you used to love being around him? I thought I was doing you a favor. If you don't like him anymore, why didn't you just reject him?" My sarcasm made her snap. "Reject him with what power? You think I could turn him down after what you pulled?" Then she spat. "God is so unfair. You were there too that day. Why didn't that psycho disfigure you? That way, you two freaks could be a match made in hell." That sentence hit me like a lightning bolt. The only reason I'd gone to that place that day was because Sloane said she saw Sterling there. She had begged me to check on him. It was all part of her setup. Sterling used to be a poor scholarship student, and I was the one who helped him. paying for his mother's treatment and even persuading my parents to adopt Sloan for his sake. He leapt to the top of the social ladder because of me. These two ungrateful backstabbers deserve to be shredded alive. My gaze grew darker. If you hate him that much, then as your big sister, I'll gladly make sure you two end up together. Sloan exploded. I would never marry that hideous freak. Not even if I died. I curled my lips into a cold smile. We'll see. A flicker of panic crossed her eyes. She knew I always followed through. Afraid I might force her into it, she had a driver take her back to campus in the middle of the night. Her plan was simple. Stay out of sight, let the engagement blow over, and eventually marry some rich heir. What a joke. The next day, the biggest headlines were those photos of Sterling holding Sloan under the moonlight. Thanks to the angles, you couldn't see her disgust. Bold, sensational headlines accompanied the images. Sterling Latham caught in secret romance with fiancée's adopted sister. Vesper Sue dumped. Affair exposed. Reputation is everything to people of status. Because the scandal was so damaging, the group's stock price took a hit. Just 2 hours later, both families were sitting together for a meeting. Sloan, who had snuck off, was forced to show up too. She looked at me like she wanted to tear me apart. I simply gave her a soft smile of mockery. Mrs. Latham held my hand. Vesper, I've looked into everything. It was a misunderstanding. You and Sterling grew up together. Why not just get married sooner? To make it up to you, we'll give you 10% of the Latham Group's shares, a villa estate, a golf course, and a $500 million cash gift. It was a $1 billion proposal. Even my parents' eyes twitched at the deal. Sloan stared in disbelief. With Sterling ruined, marrying me was the only way to ensure the family fortune wouldn't end up with an ex-wife or mistress's child. I had the brains and the reputation to handle the crisis. Sterling glared at me, certain I would marry him for the money. Everyone assumed I would agree, but then I spoke, calm and indifferent. I'm sorry. I can't accept this. The room fell silent. Is it because the offer isn't enough? Mrs. Latham rushed to ask. I let out a soft sigh and pulled a stack of pink love letters from my bag. You've misunderstood me. Last night I found this thick pile of letters in Sloan's drawer, all written to Sterling. And after seeing the photos, Sterling would never lose control unless he truly loved her. So I've decided to call off the engagement and let them be together. True love should have a happy ending. The love letters had been professionally forged by an expert. The moment I threw that accusation out there, the stain was permanent. Those letters aren't mine. Sloan jumped up. They're fake. Vesper made them up. But the handwriting was an exact match. Sterling opened a few of them, and his eyes turned red. He reached for Sloan's hand. Sloan, so you loved me this much. I'll make it up to you. Mom, I want to marry Sloan. She's the only one I'll ever marry. Mrs. Latham's face turned pale with fury. Sterling, stop this nonsense. Sloan is just an adopted daughter. She's not worthy of you. That's right, Sterling. I'm not worthy. Sloan echoed, trying to pull her hand away. But Sterling clung to it tightly. My parents, being shrewd business people, saw the logic. Marrying off an adopted daughter to a disfigured heir was a fine deal. They could save me, their beautiful biological daughter, for a better alliance later. They nodded. Since Vesper has agreed to cancel the engagement and they clearly care for each other, we should bless their union. Just like that, the engagement was finalized. Sloan was left in complete emotional ruin. She dropped out of school and moved into a villa halfway up the mountain. Her dowry was modest. No stocks, no cash, just 2 villas from Sterling's personal assets. Mrs. Latham had no intention of giving her anything more. The fact that they were even letting her through the front door was a miracle. Meanwhile, my parents realized I was all they had left and finally began involving me in the company. This time, however, I wasn't starting at the bottom as an intern. They handed me a management-level role. After all, if I were a regular employee, how could I leverage the Latham family name to close deals and secure a wealthy, eligible bachelor? To handle parents who cared only for profit, I had to demonstrate exceptional leadership and strategic foresight. Using the knowledge gained from my rebirth, I helped the company land its largest overseas order in 5 years. The new product we launched became a global sensation. As a result, I was promoted straight to vice president, earning a seat at the executive table and 5% of the company's original shares. At first, I thought this was my reward, but then my mother spoke her mind. Now that your career is stable, it's time to think about marriage, she said. Tonight, there's a social event for outstanding young professionals. Dress nicely. If you don't meet someone suitable, we'll introduce you to someone. People settle down after marriage, and once you have a son, you won't have anything to worry about. Then we'll feel comfortable handing over the company and enjoying our retirement. It was an elegant excuse. They clearly wanted me to marry for business, and they weren't ready to hand over power unless I provided a grandson. In my past life, I had longed to inherit the business to prove myself and let my parents rest. Now I couldn't care less. I already had booming private investments in e-commerce and short video platforms that would soon have me making money in my sleep. Still, I smiled and replied, "Got it. I won't let you down." That night, I attended the most exclusive singles gala in the business world. Dressed to perfection, I drew every eye in the room. I had disappeared from public view during my engagement to Sterling, and my return was a statement. I had come to scout business partners, but then I ran into Alaric. He was dressed in a sharp tailored suit, his handsome face framed by gold-rimmed glasses. His thin lips curved into a faint smile as he raised his glass toward me. Alaric looked like a refined, intellectual lead from a manga. Truth be told, he and I were the original childhood sweethearts. He was the son of Mr. Latham's first wife. After their divorce, he had moved overseas with her. He walked over slowly, towering over me. With a warm, teasing tone, he said, "All these years and you still haven't grown any taller." Even in 12-centimeter heels, I had to look up at him. "Well, someone has to hold up the sky," I chuckled. "I thought I'd stay short to give the tall ones more responsibility." He laughed. "You're still as witty as ever. This is the first time I've seen you at an event like this. It looks like you've had a change of heart. How do you know it's my first time?" I raised an eyebrow. "And weren't you living abroad? You're back and didn't even invite me to dinner." "I'm inviting you now," he said, half smiling. "Are you free tomorrow?" I clinked my glass against his. "Of course I am." I had been looking for a smart, capable partner, and the universe had delivered. Alaric was a genius who had finished his PhD at MIT and launched successful startups in finance and luxury travel. He had returned to the country the day after Sterling was disfigured. My research also revealed that it was Alaric who had discreetly fanned the flames of the scandal between Sterling and Sloane. He had been pulling the strings all along. I got straight to the point the next day. "Alaric, I know why you're back and I can help you." He paused, stirring his coffee. "Are you sure? Your father cheated and your mother took you abroad," I said. "You're back to take the company that should have been yours. If we pretend to be in a relationship, they won't choose any other heir." "Pretend to date?" he asked. I nodded. "You're single, I'm being pressured into matchmaking, and our families are matched. You lose nothing. Plus, I have 2 projects that will earn more than anything you've worked on yet." I launched into my pitch about influencer incubation and market strategies. He listened with his eyes locked on mine until nightfall. He agreed to the partnership immediately and drove me home. My parents, seeing him drop me off, couldn't stop smiling. Working with Alaric was seamless. Our projects took off and our reputation skyrocketed. But while we were making millions, I kept a close eye on Sterling and Sloane. They were legally married but had no wedding. Mrs. Latham despised Sloane's humble background, and Sloane couldn't stand Sterling's disfigured face. Once the ink was dry on the marriage certificate, Sloane stopped pretending to be a doting wife. She spent money recklessly, choosing luxury over her husband's company. Sterling, lonely and irritable from his treatments, began lashing out. Within 2 weeks of their honeymoon, they were fighting like animals. One night, a drunk Sterling hit Sloane. She snapped, calling him a hideous freak and a monster. Those words sent him into a violent rage. He beat her so badly that she would have been killed if the housekeeper hadn't intervened. Sloane called our parents from the hospital, begging for a divorce. I arrived with a fruit basket to enjoy the show. Her arm was in a sling and her face was grotesquely swollen. "I want to divorce him," she sobbed. "He's a monster. He reeks of medication and pus. It's disgusting." My mother scolded her instantly. "He's your husband. It's your fault for having a foul mouth. Stay home and take care of him. People are already laughing at us for raising an ungrateful daughter." Sloane pulled up her pant leg, revealing 30 horrifying cigarette burns. "He locks me in the bathroom and makes me eat off the floor like an animal." My parents' faces turned grim, but they remained silent. I spoke up with calculated calm. "What Sterling did was wrong, but it takes two to fight. He's just sick and unstable. If you give him a child, he'll treat you better. You'd be the mother of the Latham heir. You'd become the true matriarch." The fantasy worked. Sloane's bloodshot eyes lit up with greed. "I'll get pregnant soon," she declared. "I'll give birth to the eldest grandson." I smiled coldly. She was an idiot. Sterling was physically incapable of having children after the acid attack. Sloane moved back in and played the part of the doting wife, enduring Sterling's beatings while desperately trying to conceive. When nothing happened, she began sneaking out to beauty salons, which were actually secret meetings with handsome, smart college boys. She was clinical about it, and a month and a half later she was pregnant with twins, a boy and a girl. The news brought joy to the Lathams, but Sloane and Sterling were pointedly excluded from the group's annual gala. Instead, the invitations went to Alaric and me. Alaric had officially become the general manager and earned the board's respect. Mr. Latham had secretly decided that Alaric would inherit the company, while Sterling would merely receive a package of assets to live in comfort. Sterling had no idea. When I arranged for him to receive a third-party invitation, he thought it was from his father. He rushed to the gala with Sloane, only to find Mr. Latham on stage. "This is my son Alaric," his father announced. "A PhD from MIT and a genius in the market. He has my full confidence as the future leader of this company." Sterling erupted. "Dad, you promised me the company. Giving it to this bastard? I refuse." He turned to the stage, screaming, "Alaric, you bastard, get out." The room fell into chaos. Sterling looked like a ghost, his face a roadmap of scars. Mrs. Latham tried to quiet him, but he was unhinged. "I'm not going anywhere. My wife is carrying the rightful heir." I stepped forward and slapped him across the face. "You don't get to talk about my fiancé that way." Sterling froze. "Alaric is your fiancé?" Alaric calmly wiped my fingers with a handkerchief. "Yes, we got engaged a few days ago." Sterling ground his teeth. "Fine. But get out of my company. My son will inherit this." Alaric let out a mocking laugh. "Are you sure that baby is yours? If it's not mine, whose is it?" Sterling roared. I smiled sweetly, linking my arm with Alaric's. "Well, you never know." At that moment, dozens of phones in the room chimed. I had leaked the footage of Sloane's secret meetups with college boys. I handed Sterling a tablet. As he watched the video, his eyes turned bloodshot. He snapped, lunging at Sloane and wrapping his hands around her neck. "You filthy whore. You dare make a fool of me." The security guards were conveniently absent. I stopped guests from intervening. "He's mentally ill and violent," I said calmly. "The police are on their way." 5 minutes later, the police arrived to a nightmare. Sloane lay in a pool of blood with a dozen stab wounds. Sterling, drenched in gore, had tried to rip the baby out of her with a steak knife. In her final moments, she had kicked him in the groin, but he had driven a blade through her heart. Sterling was declared legally insane and committed to a psychiatric facility, one that I happened to be investing in. I ensured my best people would take care of him so he could experience hell on earth every day. Sloane's funeral was lavish, but I personally dumped her ashes down the sewer. Garbage belongs in the dark. My parents, traumatized by the violence, fell ill. I sent them to a luxury retirement home with private suites where they could live out their days in lonely silence. The day I officially took over the company, Alaric handed me a document. I had been gifted 30% of the company's shares, making me the largest shareholder. "Where did these come from?" I asked. Alaric sliced a piece of steak for me. "Half from your mother. She said it was part of your dowry. The rest I bought myself over the years. I figured if I couldn't be your husband, I'd at least be your boss." He reminded me of how we used to play pretend as children, king and queen. I had promised to marry him back then, a joke I thought he'd forgotten. He hadn't. He ran his fingers through my hair, his voice warm. "That was years ago. Don't overthink it. Eyes are on the front of our faces for a reason, to look forward. He raised his glass to the future. To our long and prosperous future, Miss Vance. I raised mine and smiled back. To our future. The end. Thanks for watching. Do not forget to subscribe for more stories.